Welcome back. I welcome you all to the last talk of the day. We have Maria Jose to deliver a talk on better air, better health, creating an indoor air quality monitoring and predictive system. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today talking about how to create an air quality monitoring and predictive system. And before to start, I would like to ask you, how many of you are interested in sensor data and microcontrollers? Good. And what about data analysis? Oh, good. And what about machine learning and data science in general? Awesome. This is the talk for you. Let's start then. My name is Maria Jose, as you know already. I have a background in plant molecular biology. And currently, I am working as a data scientist at Infarm, that it's a vertical farming company. But in my free time, I enjoy doing do-it-yourself projects with microcontrollers and IoT and kind of mixing all the things that I love. And this is one of those projects. What is the motivation of this project? Well, with the pandemic situation, my lifestyle changed. Before the pandemic, I was working on site, and I was having some more active life. Then I moved to remote life, and some changes happened. Some of them, it was like more be at home. I was mainly at home almost the whole day. And someday I start to feel like a lot of headaches, some feeling of being really sleepy, and I didn't know why. Until one day, I was thinking to say, what is going on in here? And I realized that when I was going outside, taking fresh air, I was feeling better. And I thought, wait a second, maybe it's something in my air, in my apartment, that it's not going really well. And then I start doing some research about to know how can you quantify your air quality at home. And I realized that there are a lot of factors. For instance, the occupants, how many people is living in your apartment. Also, there are the humidity and moisture. By the way, I think that it's really important that you take care of what is the moisture at your apartment. This is as a biologist, because the mold and the fungus are really happy once you have moisture and high humidity. But this is another topic for another day. Then we have also the ventilation. Something that you think, wow, I open the windows, and that's all, right? Well, it's a bit more complex, and you're gonna see later why. Later, we have the pollutant sources. For instance, it's not the same if you live in a city with a lot of factories, or if you live in a countryside, for instance. That is not the same if you live close to a volcano, for instance, in Canary Island, or in a desert. Also, we have odors and gases. That is quite important. And I start thinking, say, well, what is my problem? I don't know yet, right? And I start reading publication. As I mentioned, I am scientist, and I love just read scientific publication. And I realized that there was a field that a lot of scientists are publishing about CO2. And all of them, for sure, this is just some collection, but there are so many publications about CO2 and the effect of in our health. All of them end up saying that it's difficult to correlate the CO2 levels with the health problems, because it's more complex. As I mentioned before, there are the humidity, the pollutants, the previous condition, health condition that you can have, but all of them indicate that CO2 has an important factor in our health. And as you can see, for instance, in the first one, say that CO2 could have an impact in decision-making performance. Good advice. If you need to make a decision, open your window sometime before make this decision, because this could affect you. Well, what is good, what is bad, depends, right? The definition always. Be careful, because depends of the source, the numbers change. But let's take it as approximated values. What we have in here is the CO2 part per million numbers in the x-axis, and then we have the different steps when we consider that this situation is good or kind of bad. And as you can see, lower to 1,000, we are kind of considered good, and higher to 1,000 will be bad, just to summarize the information. Also, the different health impacts that we can find here, you need to have in consideration that it's around 2,000, but depends of our other factors and our previous health condition could happen before this 2,000. Well, at that point, say, hey, I need to do something and test that if my indoor conditions are okay or not. For that, what I did is say, I'm gonna take sensors, I'm gonna collect data, and I'm gonna monitor these values to see what is going on in my apartment. But then I thought, wait, what if I also could do some prediction? Because it's really nice to have the values. It's really nice to have the values in real life, but what if I could prevent this situation? And then appeared the idea of have the predictive system. Let's start step by step, because you are gonna see that it's a bit complex. Well, let's start with the data collection. Well, I used two different sensors. One is for particles, the blue one, that is the PMSA, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the SCD, that is for the CO2. I wanted to have as much data as possible, because as I mentioned before, those factors are always working together. My favorite approach, I try to keep it simple. It's like I try to do something simple, but then everything gets complex. You're gonna see. But I try to keep it simple, I promise. And then what I did is to connect this particle sensor to a Qt-Pi microcontroller, which is really, really small. It's really compact system, and was really kind of straightforward to have it. And I was running it with using CircuitPython. Everything was really okay until the moment that I decided that I want to collect all this data, and I wanted kind of do the transmission of this data. This microcontroller has not Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and then I could not collect the data. And then I thought, well, let's try another approach. You can think, okay, you could change the microcontroller and choose another one with Wi-Fi or wireless. Yeah, it's true. The thing is that I was trying to recycle the microcontrollers that I had at home to minimize kind of everything. Cost, effort, yes. But just to be honest, what happened. My second idea for the CO2 was use MicroPython with a ASP32. This microcontroller has Wi-Fi. Everything was working really well until I tried to connect the other sensor, the particle one. I had some issues with the connection, and I could not solve those issues. And it was kind of a bottleneck to me, and for that reason, I just decided to continue with another approach. But you're going to see that this is one of the work in progress that I have right now. Well, what's next? Then I went directly to a Raspberry Pi with wireless. And that will be the setup for data collection. Of course, I wanted to have something else. I wanted to have a device with a screen where I could check my information. Because it's really nice. Imagine you are in your meetings and you can see if you need to open your window or not, or how it's going on. And also it's the perfect excuse to say, hey, we need to finish the meeting because my values of CO2 are getting high. Well, I'm not sure if it will work, but maybe it's a perfect excuse. Raspberry Pi 4, in this case, also it was because I had it at home. You can probably use another one, and it's not a problem at all. And just added the screen that also is touchable. It's really nice. You're going to see later. Then, this is the project structure that we're getting. The two sensors are getting information. The storage, the information is the Raspberry Pi. And then I have the two Raspberry Pis connected for a TCP socket, a socket connection. And then we can start taking a look to the data. And of course, this is just an example of some of the data that I got. On the x-axis, we have the date. And on the y-axis, we have different parameters, right? The Celsius, the temperatures in Celsius, the humidity, and the CO2. Just to show you that there are some fluctuation there, and this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be an easy project, I can tell you. And here are my values of CO2. In green, it's kind of the good values, that it's lower than 1,000. Then in orange, I have these values that okay, could be better. And in purple are values that are not okay, especially the ones that are in the arrow and the bottom close to 2,000. This is not a good condition. And of course, I cannot correlate it with my headache because I cannot do it. But this is an indicative that the air quality of my apartment was not okay. What gave me a lot of happiness to see that this project had make a lot of sense to develop. Then we have the monitoring system by one side that you are going to see the results later. And on the other hand, we have the predictive. For the predictive one, what I did is implement a time series. If you're not familiar with the concept of time series, is basically in here we have a plot not related with the CO2. By the way, on the x-axis we have the time, and the y-axis we have values. This means that we are going to get values in time, and the time is important. The order gonna be really, really important. And here we have a quite overwhelming plot of my data. Please take it a time. It's okay. It's just that, wow. In the x-axis, we have the index. The index is the time. In time series, usually what we do is to take the time as an index. It's like first day, second day, third day. What we are going to do is 1, 2, 3, and then we take it as an index. In the y-axis, we have the CO2. And what we have here is a different oscillation of time of my values of CO2. In the arrows, we have, I am indicating some spaces where the values were quite low. Do you have an idea what happened in those times, in those moments? Open the window? No. Something else? Weekend? Windows? No. No? No? Well, I'm going to tell you, I was out at home. I was on holidays. And then once you're on holidays, you can see that the all changed. What is really cool to see. Because what is important is where I was tracking also the CO2 was in the place where I work, in the office place, let's say that way. And then if I was not in the office, where was not problems at all. In the square, I am indicating really high numbers of CO2. Do you have an idea what is going on here? Sorry?
It's all about feeding. Is this a day or is this like many months?
Many days. I had some visits at home. Then, if you have visits at home, be careful and open more frequently your windows. That is an important lesson that I learned. If you open once per day, when you have visits, try to double or triple the times. And also, really, the last interesting thing is the trend. Is this orange line that we have here? Oops, sorry. That we have in here, because at some point it start to decrease. Any idea what happened?
Change in season?
Yes. There was two things. One is the change of season. And as I live in Germany, where the winter is really cold. And then, you know, you try to decrease, to open the window because it's really, really cold. And this is a problem, as you can see. But when the spring starts, it's different. The behavior, the weather is like, yeah, let's open the window and everything will be fine. And one thing was that. And a second thing is that I start analyzing the data of the CO2, and I realized that I was having an issue at home. And I started to change the way that I was opening the windows. Because at the beginning, I was only opening one window, and then the third one, let's say, it's a combination. And I realized that when I was playing with the different windows opening, the values were changing dramatically. This means that the fluids are going in my apartment were affected. Then this is really interesting to know, and also something interesting to play with in case that you're interested. Oh, that's it. Then was okay, let's implement some machine learning to try to predict my CO2 levels. There are so many approaches that you can use to do it. In my case, I saw this publication which has a really interesting approach because it has an adaptive approach to predict the indoor CO2. And then also they have this table with the different conditions, different parameters, and different architecture. And I kind of realized that it was like, wow, I can implement a lot of different architecture. Yes, I buy it. Of course, I did some variations in my project, but at the end, what I try to follow is the adaptive idea of Windows of that. But I am doing some spoilers for the next one. Then I create the data set. Well, I monitored, before create the data set, I monitored different variables. That was the CO2, the humidity, the temperature, the particles, and also the activity level. Because of course, as you realize, if you are not at home, then you decrease the levels of CO2. And then if you include that in your model, the prediction will not be really accurate, because if you are not at home, you don't produce CO2, and then that. Yeah, these kind of things. Then I create the data set, having in consideration of how the time series work. Always be careful with that. Also needs to be normalize the data for the training. And I implement this idea of Windows, the mobile Windows. In this case, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this kind of methodologies, but what we have is a period of time that we train our model, and then we do the prediction for the next hour, days, depends what you need. Then what you want is move this window to the prediction and update that. We move, we update, we retrain, we retrain, we retrain, we retrain. What we are going to have with that is more accurate results, because we are having more updated results. Because if you have seasonality, or if you are not at home, or if you have whatever reasons you have, your data set will be affected. And then at least if you have the most recent situation, you are going to get more accurate results. Then I use a CNN. I'm not going to go into details, because if not, we are not going to be able to end the talk. But if you have any questions later, I will be happy, or at some moment, just to show you what is the architecture of the CNN looks like. What I like also to share, and I like to see when I go to data science talks, is this how people do these hyperparameter selections. For that reason, I also include it. But I'm going to keep it also fast and simple in case that you are not really interested. But I love it, and for that reason, I decided to include it. I just mention a couple of things. Is like we have a convolution 1D, that in that place we are analyzing, what it's doing is analyzing and structure the features. Then we have the input shape, that we are going to introduce the variables and the times, and the time there. In the max pool 1D, what is happening is we're taking the most important information, and then we are going to have our output. This is. Of course, there are much more code. This is just a part, just to let you know. Well, about metrics and results, I use the RMS as a metric of performance. I did some experiments for hyperparameters. I tried to see how it was working. But as you know, as the data science projects, you need to iterate one-on-ones, and I didn't invest so much. I just did some analysis and approaches, because what we are going to need to do once this project is done is go back and improve and optimize all the process. Then, from the windowing perspective, it's really nice, and I love it, implement that. But you need to be aware that each window gonna have their own performance, because if you have lack of data in some window, or something happened, or a lot of things could be. And here I show you some results that I just consider that could be really interesting to see, and how it's going. In blue, we have the input. In green, we have the labels. And in this, in orange, this cross is the prediction. What I'm having here is a window of 24 hours. And what I'm doing is a prediction each hour. Of course, in the final version of what we are going to see, we are not going to have this exactly. What we are going to have is the prediction at the end. But I just wanted to share with you how it was going in each step. And as you can see, in some points, it's quite accurate. What we expect is have overlapping between the labels and the prediction, the green and the orange. But in some cases and some moments, it's not happening. But it's kind of normal, and it's something that needs to be optimized. But it's not bad at all. Then, this is the final project structure that we got. Because we are going to have the machine learning predictions deployed in our Raspberry Pi, and then we are going to have a simple Flask application in the other Raspberry Pi, and we are going to have the display. and how everything looks together. First, I thought, oh, okay, I need to install all my sensors and Raspberry Pi in my apartment. Let's do it nice. And I remove a picture of my sister. Don't tell her, please don't tell her. But and I substitute her for some sensors. Yeah, well. This is how it looks like the Flask application in our Raspberry Pi. It is the one that we are going to have close to our seat or where you work. And what you can see is in here is the temperature, the humidity. This is the CO2 concentration. In here we have the prediction and just the date. The idea is to have the raw values from the sensors in constant, in real time. Of course, not each second. I think that I program every 10 minutes, if I am not wrong right now. And then the prediction each hour. Why 1 hour? I decided 1 hour because it's kind of a time enough to when I end a meeting and I can kind of take a break. And it's time enough to me to open the window and do something. For the other values are really interesting to have more frequently. But of course, this is depends on the criteria and the things that you need. And this is how it looks like. This is your Raspberry Pi and change and that. What is work in progress right now? I am doing this implementation, but using microcontrollers, not taking out at least one of the Raspberry Pi. My idea is implement and use TensorFlow Lite, kind of for fun, let's be honest. I want to just do a bit of research and see. And something that I didn't mention is that I didn't include the particles information in my model. And maybe someone is wondering, wait, but you changed the system from the microcontrollers to the Raspberry Pi for that, right? Yes, I did. The problem was that the sensor arrived late, because I bought it a bit late, and I could not have all the data that I wanted, and I had the system running with the CO2 and the humidity and temperature, and I did this decision to say, okay, I'm gonna take out the particles, but for the next iteration will be in, because we'll bring a lot of interesting information. And then, of course, optimization. This project, as a data science project, needs optimization, but also from microcontrollers also could be optimized, and yeah, all the projects could be. And yeah, that I'm gonna end my presentation here. If you want to be in touch or if you have questions, just feel free to reach me out. I will be really happy to discuss, because I love all those topics. As you can see, I enjoy it a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention.